between now and 4 o'clock. Well, it's been a busy week in Westminster, hasn't it? We speak to a Conservative MP, Andrew Rosendale, about the latest on Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, and we'll be looking ahead to the local elections as Parliament goes into its Easter recess. Also ahead in the programme, Germany has introduced a crisis group to help the country ration its gas supply as it weans itself off resources from Russia. In the last couple of minutes, it's been suggested that they, being Russia, may well cut off gas supplies if countries do not pay for it in rubles. We'll have the latest from Berlin. And we'll speak to a former Labour advisor on how the party manages the trans debate. With different MPs taking different views, should Labour have a coherent message? And we'll head to Scotland, where the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has delayed the end of mask wearing until after Easter. We'll be discussing why. As always, also get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Always keen to hear what you've got to say on today's stories. All that between now and 4 o'clock. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the latest news.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russians, with broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky received standing ovations as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments. He asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership. He also told them Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world.
Whatever is happening in our region because of the Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well, because this is the nature of the evil. It can instantly cross any distance. Russian representatives, officials, official propagandists, they are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
Speaking in Brussels earlier, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said there's no evidence that Russia is scaling back.
According to our intelligence, Russian units are not withdrawing, but repositioning. Russia is trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region. So we can expect additional offensive actions, bringing even more suffering.
Meanwhile, in a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and that Putin's overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisers are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
A deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The companies welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down the wells during an energy crisis. Labour has launched its local election campaign in Bury, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600. The party is warning that households can expect to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. The Labour leader says the public deserves better than what he calls a pathetic response from the government. Responding to a question about Partygate, Sir Keir said the Prime Minister's wife should be named if she's fined, but ultimately the buck stops with Boris Johnson.
If Carrie Johnson gets a fixed penalty notice, of course it should be made public. My focus is on the Prime Minister because he's the one who sets the culture. He's the one who oversaw this criminality in his home and his office. He's the one that came to Parliament and said that all rules were complied with, which is clearly not the case.
Firefighters are tackling a large blaze at a business in Stretton in Derbyshire. They say the fire covers an area of 30 metres. Staffordshire Police have closed nearby roads and drivers are being advised to avoid the area. No injuries have been reported. And Royal Mail is phasing out its traditional first and second class stamps, replacing them with new barcoded ones. It's part of a modernisation drive boasting added security features. Customers will also be able to watch and share videos by scanning the barcodes in the Royal Mail app. Normal stamps will be valid until February next year. After that, you'll be able to swap them for the new versions. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Darren.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Welcome to GB News, the briefing, just after 3 o'clock, 6 minutes past 3, on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you for your company on this Thursday afternoon. Well, yesterday we had the Prime Minister live at the Liaison Committee in Parliament. He was grilled on everything from Ukraine to the cost of living crisis, with many members of the committee also asking the government if it would would go further to help people combat the cost of living crisis. Today, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is in India on a potentially awkward visit, as her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, is also there. It comes as India has been reluctant to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the country signing a free trade deal with President Putin last week. And as the Russian invasion of Ukraine continues to backfire, there are reports that advisors to Vladimir Putin are fearful to give him the full truth on events on the ground in Ukraine because they fear his reaction. It comes as British intelligence has said that Russian troops in Ukraine are demoralised, short of equipment, and are refusing to carry out orders. And we're hearing also in the last couple of minutes, simply because the Kremlin had insisted that they wanted to see gas and oil supplies into Europe paid in rubles. The Germany and France have said that they're preparing for Russia to potentially cut off gas deliveries as early as tomorrow, but that the German Chancellor has insisted that gas payments will continue in euros or dollars. We could see a big showdown tomorrow on that. To discuss all of this, I'm joined in the studio by the Conservative MP, Andrew Rosendale. Andrew, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Just first of all, on this issue of Ukraine, we heard, didn't we, overnight from the head of GCHQ, who's down in Australia, giving a speech, that Vladimir Putin, rather extraordinarily, isn't getting a full picture of what's happening on the ground from his own military commanders. Do you think in many ways, that's clearly a significant blow to Russia, but in some ways does it make it more of a dangerous situation, if you like?
We are in a terribly dangerous situation with Ukraine, however you look at it. But the truth is that President Putin is somebody who appears to be in a bunker. I think people around him are afraid of him. I think that the military probably don't want to be there, but they're made to be there. They don't really understand what their mission is, but they're there. And we don't know where this is going to lead. Now, we hope that he's going to realise at some point that for him, it's unwinnable. But I don't think we're there yet. And I still think we're facing a very dangerous period.
Very dangerous indeed. Britain continuing in many ways to supply weapons to Ukraine, money as well. Boris Johnson, I think, had a conversation earlier this week, didn't he, with Emmanuel Macron and with President Biden and others. Is there a sense now that Britain is going to have to be in this for the long haul?
I think that the Western democracies have to be in this for the long haul, unless there is some kind of agreement where there is a peace treaty and a withdrawal. I don't see this going away. I think this is here for a very long time because Ukraine is one issue. If he gets away with Ukraine, or if he feels that he's had some kind of victory, there's always the fear he would try it somewhere else. And there are other countries in the frame. So this is not something we can afford to let go. We have to be in it for the long term, and we have to stand by the Ukrainian people.
In terms of that, if we are in for long term, or if this war is to last for the long term, I mean, that has got long-term consequences. We've seen the short-term consequences in terms of petrol prices and even greater squeeze on energy bills and the cost of living crisis. Do you think the British public are prepared for that, even if they are overall rather incredibly supportive of Ukraine's resistance?
I'm not sure the British people are prepared for what is likely to happen in the coming years. Frankly, we've had many years now of very strong economic growth. There's been ups and downs, we know, but generally speaking, since the huge economic reforms that Mrs. Thatcher brought in the 1980s, our economy has steadily grown and people have become richer. We're living in a lovely society, but it's been taken for granted. And it's events such as this, the pandemic, now war in Ukraine, that can suddenly change things. And we're heading into a rocky period. We need to spend more money because the cost of living. We need to help those who are most in need. I think we've got to increase defence spending now. We can't avoid that. We've, I think, foolishly cut back on defence for rather too long. And now we're way behind. We've got to ratchet that up as well. And I called for it in the chamber of the House of Commons this week. So we've got a period where we need to spend more money, but at the same time, we've got an economic dip occurring. So whoever's in government, there's major problems ahead.
Yeah, no one assumes it's going to be easy, but if you say we need to spend more money, whether that's helping people out with the energy crisis and also to increase defence spending, where's that money going to come from? Because the higher taxes, in many ways, offset, don't they, the potential intervention from the government?
Right, so we need a new strategy, in my view. We need to stop thinking about income and expenditure. We need to think about how we can generate more income and how we can do some pretty radical things to bring investment into our country and to make it easier for people to work, easier for people to trade, less bureaucracy, less red tape, more incentive for economic growth. And that means not increasing taxation. That means incentivising the economy to be more vibrant. So we need to go for probably as radical as we possibly can, but action to increase the overall income to our economy. And if we do that, I think that if we are heading for a downturn, a recession, whatever it might be, it will be mitigated by the fact that we have increased the ability of the British people to increase the income.
Do you think, though, then, in the end, that this tax rise, which is coming in from tomorrow, essentially, is a massive mistake?
I think people are going to be hit hard by it. The energy prices, the cost of living, food prices are going up. There is a massive problem.
Well, but income tax is going to go up for an awful lot of people.
Income tax as well.
Because the thresholds are changing and national insurance.
I'm very unhappy about that, as you know. A lot of Conservative MPs are unhappy about it. I understand why they did it. I'm not sure it's the right thing. And I think that all these things coming at once is going to create a big political headache for the Prime Minister. I want the Prime Minister to succeed. This is one of these points in politics where we've got to be a bit radical and do things that we perhaps didn't intend to do originally, but to ensure that we have a better chance of coming through this.
Just coming back finally on this, though, to what you were saying about economic growth, about that is the way out of this crisis. In the end, a lot of things have happened over the last 12 years with the Conservative Party in government. Is that the biggest problem or the biggest wrong that's not been righted, is that we have seen productivity collapse in this country and stagnant economic growth for a very long period of time?
Nobody gets everything right, and we haven't got everything right. We faced some big challenges in the last few years, but we do have to now get back to core Conservative values, which is economic, free enterprise, low taxation, incentivising everyone to work, businesses to be able to flourish. And now that we've left the European Union, we're completely free to make our own decisions again. So we should actually incentivise people via the fact that we are now completely independent. We don't have to worry about what the European Union are going to say. Now, it may annoy some of our allies in the European Union if we, for instance, corporation tax.
I mean, it's extraordinary, but
it's going to be good for our economy.
Yeah, but one of the obvious things you could do that is a Labour Party policy on getting rid of VAT on energy, which the Chancellor seems he doesn't want to do.
Right, so all those things need to be considered. The Chancellor doesn't want to do it, and I think the reason he doesn't want to do it is because it's not very targeted. It means wealthy people will not pay the VAT on the energy either, so they will benefit. And nobody wants to. We want to help the poorer people and the people that are really struggling to make ends meet. We don't want to do things that are going to make wealthier people a little bit more wealthy. So I think that if we're going to do things like that, they have to be targeted to help the people most in need.
And just very finally, let's head on to the local elections. We saw Keir Starmer, didn't we, there today in the news bulletin, launching Labour's campaign. You're out on the streets, you're knocking on doors, you're talking to your constituents. What do you think is at play in these local elections? What are the concerns that voters have?
Right, so I'm from the London Borough of Havering, so we're a London borough, and there the biggest...
And the Conservatives are in trouble in London, it must be said.
Yes, but we're Essex, really, we're not really London. But yes, you're right, the Conservatives are facing a very tough set of elections. And the big issue locally in my area is that they want the place to stay a town and country borough. They don't want to be dragged into inner London, and they fear what Sadiq Khan is doing is he's imposing this London plan to urbanise traditional parts of Essex and the outer London areas. So I think that although people are not necessarily happy with the government, there's lots of issues going on, I don't think it's necessarily the case they're going to want to put the Labour Party in power in local government, because certainly in my area there's a real fear about what a Labour council would do, and I share those fears.
Has Partygate had an impact, do you think?
It has had an impact, but I think that most people now can see there are bigger issues to deal with. Hopefully this will not be a long-term matter. I do hope that it can be resolved quickly, because there are so many, and you've highlighted them today, Darren, so many bigger issues that the nation faces.
Do you almost think, though, that irrespective of what now happens with that, if there's a fixed penalty fine, if Sue Gray's report is pretty damning, that the Prime Minister should just stay in position?
Oh, absolutely. He's there for the long haul. He's got to finish the job he was elected to do, and there's lots of new challenges he's now got to face. So he needs to stay, do the job, and get the country firmly back on the right track.
OK, Andrew Rosendale, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the studio. Oh, that's not me. There we are. There we go. Let's move on, because we're going to talk about P&O now. A ferry worker has told GBNews about the day he was sacked on the spot whilst he was on board a ship in Rotterdam. He says that staff were ordered back to the UK on coaches with no food, water, or even a ticket home. These new revelations come amid today's deadline for P&O ferry workers to accept or decline their compensation packages. And our reporter, Ellie Costello, has been speaking to those employees, and this is her report.
For staff on board the Spirit of France ferry, which was docked in Rotterdam, they were sacked via a written statement. They were told to get off the ferry and return back to the UK immediately. Many of the sacked employees had lived and worked on the ship for over 20 years. One sacked seafarer, Toby, not his real name, has told me exclusively what that day was like.
The captain said there was going to be a big announcement. He didn't sound quite right on the tannoy. Then the security guards started moving up, coming up the gangway onto the ship. They told everybody to go to the front bar, and all the security guards came along and blocked all the exits. And then some man in a suit read out his statement, and we were all told to pack our stuff, get off the ship as soon as possible, and they'd lead us to our cabins to pack. It's unbelievable. It felt like we'd been invaded by a load of pirates, to be honest with you. And then after that happened, they started bringing the crew on. I think they're all Colombians, and we're still at the front bar. That's the only time it nearly kicked off on our ship, because the crew was reacting bad enough from being sacked. And there you are. And then the agency label was taken upstairs, and our chef went upstairs to check on the staff food, and they were eating all of our staff food. Can you believe it? It's unbelievable. The way they treated us made you feel like you were worthless. You know, I mean, we've worked our butts off, basically, for the last 2 years, and now it's coming to the end like at the end of a tunnel, and you're sacked. And you get repaid by being sacked on the spot and replaced by slave labour. That's what it is. Slave labour.
So why do you think it was done in the way that it was? Why do you think P&O Ferries got security involved?
The security wasn't even there for our safety. It was in case we vandalised the ship, like the French did when they got sacked, because they smashed their ships up big time. But I mean, we're not like that. We're English. We're seafarers. On the gangway, we were asked our name and then handed an envelope with our redundancy offer on it. Even if I was offered my job back, I wouldn't take it if Peter Hebblethwaite was still there. The whole system's got to change. They've got to start caring for their workers more.
And what was the journey like back home after that experience? You must have all been so shocked.
We were put onto coaches home from Rotterdam. There was no food or water all day. We had a pregnant woman on our coach who was really stressed. We finally got to the Eurotunnel and there weren't even any tickets booked for us. Eventually, the bus driver paid for all of our tickets on a company credit card, and we all managed to get onto our competitor DFDS's ship, and they put the whole crew in the Premier Lounge where we got free tea and coffee. They treated us better than our own company, really.
We put these allegations to P&O Ferries. In a statement, they did not deny that the sacked seafarers were not given food, water or a ticket to get home. A spokesperson has told us, "We profusely apologise for the difficulties people had during this journey. Due to reasons outside of our control, we weren't able to use the pre-arranged route and alternative arrangements had to be made at the last minute." In response, Toby says he does not accept P&O's apology, and this statement sums up the way that they had treated their staff. He wishes instead to thank the great British public for all of their support. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll talk about Ukraine. But first of all, lots of you have been getting in touch with us. Kerry says, instead of Liz Truss dollying about in India, we should just shut down the unjustified aid. Why the hell are UK taxpayers funding India anyway, not to mention the likes of China and the rest of them? We never get a say. Tony says, hello, no ruble, no gas, the EU is in chaos. Hilarious. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And finally, Nick says we need to stop telling people that they need to give more money to improve the economy in a society that increases the gap between the wealthy and everyone else. The wealthy need to step off the gravy train and stop capitalising on misery and poverty. Do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll get to some of those a little later on in the programme too. Going to take a quick break though. Coming up, as you saw, we're going to be talking about Ukraine. We'll be in Berlin and also finding out what the latest situation is on the ground. Can Russia be treated that is prepared in certain parts of the country to offer a ceasefire? All that in just a couple of minutes, but first, here's the weather from the Met Office.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. There's a small chance of seeing the aurora tonight across parts of northern Britain. A greater chance, though, of seeing a frost. It's going to be a cold one right across the land. High pressure is dominating, but the winds are coming around that high down from the north. That's why it was so chilly out there today. Still a brisk wind blowing across eastern parts in particular, and still plenty of showers coming in from the east as well. So it could well turn icy overnight where we have these showers, which will be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and some snow in places for eastern Scotland, northeast England and at times for East Anglia and parts of Kent also. For the west, many places just dry and clear. Temperatures, though, will be dropping down close to freezing, certainly well below in rural spots. Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe down to -4, -5. Where there's snow lying on the ground, maybe as low as -7 or 8 across Scotland. So a frosty start. We will see more wet weather coming into the northwest, bringing some snow to the hills. Still some showers across the east, so certainly could be icy for the morning rush hour. Temperatures will tick up through the day, though, and we'll keep some showers coming into northeastern parts of England and East Kent. But otherwise, a lot of dry, bright weather with some sunshine. A touch milder than today, still below average, still feeling pretty chilly, but the winds perhaps not quite as strong as they have been today either. We'll see a bit more wet weather coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland during the evening. That'll have some snow over the hills, and we'll still have some snow mixed in as it heads southwards across Wales during the early hours of Saturday morning. That'll bring a showery start to the weekend across South Wales, southwest England, with some snow over the mountains and the moors. Still 1 or 2 scattered showers across the east, but otherwise a lot of dry, bright weather across the country this weekend. It's going to stay on the chilly side, yes. There will still be a few showers here and there, but many places will see some sunny spells. But do watch out for some icy conditions overnight tonight.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News, 27 minutes past 3 o'clock. Thank you for your company. Now, Germany and Austria have moved a step closer to gas rationing yesterday. That's actually, they activated an emergency plan designed to help it cope with any disruption in supplies from Russia. It comes amid fears of a looming shutdown and a potential showdown with Vladimir Putin over those gas supplies. Germany's economy minister convened a crisis team and warned consumers and businesses to reduce consumption. As Europe's largest economy, Germany is one of the EU's members that is most reliant on supplies from the Kremlin-controlled reserves, making it particularly vulnerable if the taps are turned off. Well, joining me now is a good friend of ours, a good friend of the channel, is the German correspondent, Thomas Sparrow. Thomas, thank you so much indeed again for joining us. And things do seem to have changed and ratcheted up a little bit this afternoon, with Russia kind of setting a deadline of tomorrow, insistent that their gas and oil needs to be paid for in Russian rubles.
And exactly while Russia was announcing that, the chancellors of both countries, so the Austrian chancellor and the German chancellor, were meeting right here in Berlin. And among the topics they discussed, obviously, that dependence on Russian energy, and in particular dependence on Russian gas. And both leaders, the German chancellor and the Austrian chancellor, agreed that they would work towards reducing that dependence, but that they do not believe that a boycott of Russian energy is the right way forward, because it would ultimately not only affect Russia, but it would ultimately affect national economies here in Germany and in Austria. And that's why both Austria and Germany are very adamant that the sanctions that have already been in place, that have already been put against Russia, are effective, they are working, and as such, further measures, in particular tackling that energy sector, have to be carefully taken step by step. In other words, Germany is not in a position to cut its dependence on Russian gas immediately. It is something that it wants to do and that it's working towards, but it is not something that's going to happen today or tomorrow.
So, Thomas, give us a sense of what this kind of shortage might mean, this emergency meeting. What are they suggesting to consumers and to businesses to do as of now?
Well, gas storage facilities here in Germany are filled to around 25% now. It's a low figure, but it means essentially that there are no immediate problems that Germany is facing. However, the German economy minister, Robert Habeck, who is also the vice chancellor, did activate the first stage of an emergency plan to precisely prepare for the eventuality that supplies from Russia could be cut. It's a precautionary measure, so it's only the first step, which basically means that there will be a crisis group meeting on a daily basis in his ministry, trying to evaluate the situation, trying to help businesses prepare, and try to make sure that if that does happen, if Russia does stop delivering gas, that Russian businesses and that German businesses and German households are also prepared to deal with that scenario. If there were shortages, if they did stop delivering gas to Germany, then Germany would activate the second and the third stage of that emergency plan. The third stage of that emergency plan would basically mean that those deliveries would have to be prioritized, or the gas is already available, and it will be prioritized first and foremost to households and to hospitals and other very important facilities here. And that is why German businesses in particular said they welcomed plans to prepare for these situations, yet at the same time they're worried because that would certainly cause a lot of economic problems here in Germany.
And just very finally, is this now a point of kind of who blinks first, in the sense that obviously if Russia were to genuinely turn off gas and oil supplies, it would have big, big consequences for both sides?
It would certainly have consequences for both sides. We heard from the German government yesterday that according to their information, they will still be able to pay for Russian gas in euros through one of the Russian banks that have not been affected by sanctions so far. Whether this changes now with Russia's latest decision, that is something that remains to be seen. And that is the reason why ultimately Germany, but not only Germany, also Austria, both countries are preparing for the possibility that Russia could then stop delivering gas. It would be very difficult for both countries, for Germany and Austria, but that is the reason why they are ultimately preparing already, and why, in the case of Germany, the government activated the first stage of this emergency plan.
Thomas, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thomas Sparrow there, joining us from Berlin. Thank you. You're watching The Briefing here on GB News. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll be speaking to an army expert on reports that Russia are deploying more troops from its deadly Wagner group to fight in Ukraine. We'll be getting the latest on the military situation on the ground, about what is happening and where. But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news just after.
Thank you, Darren. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russians, with broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky received standing ovations as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments. He asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership. He also told them Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world. In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people. Meanwhile, Ukraine says many of the Russian forces occupying the Chernobyl nuclear plant have left and are heading towards the Belarusian border, leaving just a few on the ground of the exclusion zone. It also says Russian troops have retreated from a nearby town where Ukrainians who work at the Chernobyl plant live. The deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The companies welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down the wells during an energy crisis. Meanwhile, Labour has launched its local election campaign in Bury, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600. The party warns households can expect to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. It's back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing on this Thursday afternoon. It is 22 minutes to 4 o'clock. We're on TV, online and on your radio. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Get in touch. Now, the Ministry of Defence has said that Russia is planning to deploy 1,000 Wagner mercenaries to eastern Ukraine to fight alongside Russian troops. The Wagner Group has been looking at trying to relocate forces from other conflict zones around the world and trying to strengthen its ranks, with commentators suggesting that they could be used as cannon fodder in order to limit actual deaths among the Russian military. Well, join me now to discuss all of this is Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, very good afternoon to you. Let's first of all focus on the Wagner Group if we can. They're often called Putin's private army. It's a group of mercenaries that are used in different conflicts around the world in which Russia's an influence and an interest.
Well, it's a private military security company in UK terms, so probably not mercenary in that, but it's used as one of those things where plausible deniability for Russian foreign policy overseas, and it's been particularly active, of course, in Syria and more recently in Mali, where it seeks to take over some of the vacuum from the French forces there being withdrawn. So a private military security company. But I think what's most important in terms of what's going on in Ukraine is that a briefing 2 days ago by General Todd Waters, who's the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, to the Senate Armed Forces Committee, said that 70 to 75% of the entire Russian armed forces is being used in Ukraine. So we often talk about 200,000 being there and the Russian armed forces being 900,000 strong. But readiness actually matters. So if you've got 70 to 75% of the Russian armed forces there, and you haven't got the means to achieve what you want to achieve with the regular forces, you've got to try and join a coalition. And one of the ways of joining a coalition is either co-opting other states, such as Belarus, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, or things like the Wagner Group, a private military security company. And it was Jeremy Fleming, of course, who gave that brief today in Australia, who said that they will be used as cannon fodder. And the reason he said that, of course, is that the Wagner Group are not included in the casualty statistics of the Russian armed forces because they're a private military security company. So you can off-ramp them in terms of any of their casualties from what is going on. So I think they will get a kicking as the other parts of the Russian armed forces are. And private military security companies fight for money. They don't fight for ideology. And when they've been confronted, as they were, for example, by the Americans around Al-Tanf in Syria, they are not that effective. So I think they're going to get a shock as well from the Ukrainian armed forces. So I don't think this adds to the capability, because armies are still very difficult to produce. And this is not part of a coherent all-arms grouping with artillery, infantry, armour, engineers. It is just an extension of the little green men, because they were used in the Donbass from 2014.
Just in terms of how long this can go on for, how long could Russia sustain at the levels of casualties that we've seen since the start of this conflict until it kind of literally runs out of people to send?
Well, I don't think they'll ever run out of people if they limit it to the sort of Donbass and across from to Mariupol and the Crimea. But they're failing the tests of strategy. It's got to be feasible, acceptable, sustainable to the objective you want to achieve. So we can certainly say that they're not achieving their grand strategic objectives, which of course included regaining lost territory and spheres of influence and re-establishing Russia as a great power. That's all gone for a complete ball of chalk. Neither have they achieved their strategic objectives. They've not neutralized Ukraine. They've not demilitarized Ukraine. They didn't capture Kiev by D+3. They hadn't replaced the political polity with Zelensky, and neither have they at the moment captured and held key cities. And I think what's important there is actually they're being turned back in certain areas, and certainly around Kiev, the repositioning of 20% of the forces. And in the south, where the Ukrainians are counterattacking northwest of Crimea and seem to be in a position where they can hold Kherson, the Kherson area, and Mykolaiv. And that is really important, because that really shows that any potential for an amphibious operation at Odessa is off the table for the future. So you're just back to the Donbass, which of course was the original justification for the war from Russia. But those original justifications were probably rubbish. It was the peacekeeping operation. We've been invited in, and we're there to stop genocide. All things, of course, which the International Court of Justice said were no longer valid about 2 weeks ago.
But in saying all of this, then, so if the focus is going to be on the Donbass region, and Russia essentially have explicitly said that, haven't they, this week? But yet, we've heard that Russian soldiers are digging in still in positions around Kyiv, and reporters last night were suggesting that there were still quite a few heavy explosions in and around the capital. Is that really the plan, or is that simply misinformation from Russia? Because what you seem to be suggesting is that at this point, and potentially never now, will Russia be able to actually take the capital itself?
No, they won't under the current guise of what they're doing. So really you have three things in play here. A negotiation strand, a potential digging in strand, but if you dig in, you've also got to keep resupplied. And one of the things about mechanised or armoured forces is as soon as you stop, you keep consuming your fuel, which is very heavy, and your combat supplies you still need to eat. And that's why you see lots of abandoned vehicles. The third thing they could do is, of course, they could still escalate. I'm not saying it will happen, but, you could deploy chemical weapons or other weapons still on Kyiv to try and break the will of the Ukrainian people. Because I think what's important is what General Mark Milley said when he became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in America 2.5 years ago. 5 myths that we need to let go of are, firstly, wars will be short. They may not be. Armies are easy to create. They're not. Armies fight wars. They don't. Nations fight wars. You can win wars from afar just by dropping ordnance. That's what we're seeing with the Russians, particularly in Mariupol. You can't. And fifthly, and this plays back to the Wagner thing, special forces or private military security companies can do it all. They can't.
Just very finally, before we let you go, we've heard reports as well from Ukraine that they're offering essentially 44,000 quid and a full amnesty to Russian soldiers who give up. They say it is happening, and there were images released yesterday of Russian volunteers now essentially joining the Ukrainian side. Are these reports credible? I mean, it's always difficult to tell, isn't it? There's propaganda on both sides, of course, in any conflict. But do we think this is happening on any serious scale, that many Russian troops are essentially not just giving up, but switching sides?
I think you'd have to see that en masse for that to be really something that you would say is going on at the moment. But there is nothing worse than a demoralised force to erode your combat power. And as soon as you lose your supply lines, be it fuel, water, rations, ammunition, your morale starts to be sapped. And that's why we will see people surrender. Whether the scale means that you've got battalion tactical groups or brigade groupings surrendering will be something to see in the next week. I think there are certain areas where the Russians have certainly culminated. They've no longer got any offensive combat power, but that is certainly not true in the Donbass and around Mariupol and towards Crimea, where there will still be a lot of severe fighting and a lot of death still in the next week or two, unless there is some sort of settlement, which doesn't look on the cards at the moment.
Chip, excellent analysis. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Major General Chip Chapman joining us down the line from Jamaica. Now, let's move on, because we're going to focus on some domestic politics. It is Easter recess, but politics doesn't stop. We've seen the Labour leader today, haven't we, launching Labour's local election campaign. Elections should be held in England, Scotland and Wales, and also in Northern Ireland on May 5th. But it comes at a week in which Keir Starmer's refused to discuss whether a woman can have a penis. It also comes at a week in which he wasn't the only Labour senior figure questioned about this. We heard also from Angela Rayner from Wes Streeting, and today from Rachel Reeves on things like LBC, the BBC, and indeed on Talk Radio. So what is going on, and do Labour have a clear message? Should they have a clear message on all of this? Well, joining us to discuss it is the former advisor to the Labour Party, Scarlett Maguire. Good afternoon, Scarlett. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We don't really want to get into discussion here about what Labour should be saying. It's more about whether they should have at least a coherent message on this. It's something Tony Blair has suggested in recent days. Before we do that, though, why do you think this question has now cropped up time and time again over the last week? Is it simply because journalists know that it's a chance to trip up Labour politicians?
Well, that's certainly how it comes across. I mean, I think what's really important is actually to stop seeing it as an excuse for a gotcha moment and to start thinking about trans people, right? And that's what the Labour policy is about. Is it's recognising that there are people who are very, very unhappy in the bodies that they were born with, and they transition. And the big question is, and it always seems to be about men to women. We hear very little about women who transition to men. The big question is a trans woman a woman? And Labour says yes, a trans woman is a woman. And actually, what is important is that there are debates around it. There's debates around safe spaces. There's debates around sport and testosterone, and that actually it's had, not in a hysterical way, not trying to catch people out, but trying to think, how do we do this for the best? How does it work out so that we don't have adult females, as we call them, actually put at risk because we're going to change the policy. And that's why it's a serious debate. And it just shouldn't be used as a way of tripping up politicians.
But at the same time, isn't there a fear for the Labour Party that they will continue until they have agreed essentially what the position is as a party, that they will continue to be asked these questions for weeks, months, years to come?
Well, I mean, and ditto the Conservative Party. I mean, it's the Conservative Party who have a member of Parliament who has announced publicly that he's transitioning, right? And what he's said is he's been unhappy in his body since he was a child. He has gender dysmorphia. And what's so important about him is at the moment, he says he's a man, right? There is no question he is a man, but he is going to transition. So at what stage does he become a woman? And this is actually as much a question for the Conservative Party as for the Labour Party, as for the country, to actually begin to accept that there are trans people. And I don't think that Boris Johnson making some snotty joke at a dinner the night before this poor man comes out helps anything. And I actually think that what we need is to have a serious debate and serious discussions, because... Go on.
No, I just want to interrupt you there because that's the kind of crucial bit I really want to get to, which is Boris Johnson did make that joke, and some people claimed it was insensitive, but I don't think there's no cause for him to retract it in terms of like a mass public movement towards it. I don't think Keir Starmer could get away with making a joke like that, and that's why my suggestion is that this is a more difficult issue for the Labour Party. Is that true? And why do you think that is? Why is it more of a difficult issue for the Labour Party?
No, I think actually it is changing for the Conservative Party. I mean, I think that with Jamie Wallis, is the Conservative Party do have to think about what they're doing. It's more of an issue for the Labour Party, because as always with social issues, the thing about the Labour Party is they love having debates. I mean, the people in the Labour Party, they agree and they disagree, and there's no question that there is a lot of debate within the Labour Party as to how to get to the right answer. Right? I mean, there are people who feel you cannot transition, that only women are women and men are men, and that's that. As I'm sure there are throughout society. And then there are probably more people who believe that actually you can transition. I also think it's very much a demographic, it's a generation thing, is that the older generation are more likely to say men are men, women are women. The younger generation are much more likely to say, actually, let's listen to people. And if somebody is unhappy, let them transition. I mean, frankly, transitioning has been going on for decades. I mean, I remember, I think I was a teenager when Jan Morris, the very well-known at that time travel writer for the Sunday Times, transitioned. And it was dealt with incredible sympathy. She wrote a wonderful piece about why she'd become a woman and was accepted as a woman, right?
Okay, just we've run out of time on it, but Scott, really appreciate your thoughts. Scott McGuire there joining us down the line. It is a debate that is going to continue, and it is a debate within the Labour Party that's going to continue, and of course we will carry on covering it in the weeks and months to come. GB Views though at gbnews.uk if you've got a view on that, which I'm sure many of you have. Now, just before we let you go, let's turn to Scotland, because there mandatory face coverings are going to remain in place until at least after Easter. That's according to the First Minister, though Nicola Sturgeon was seen at Westminster Abbey on Tuesday not wearing a mask in a religious sighting. That is despite what it says should happen in Scotland. Now, she was in England, but she insists that Scots should do the same in Scotland. She didn't do the same when she came down to visit. Let's talk to Craig Hoy. He is a Conservative MSP. He joins us down the line from Hollywood. Craig, thank you very much indeed for joining us. In saying that, it's not just Nicola Sturgeon who thinks that we should carry on wearing masks. Here in England, many health professionals, including Jenny Harris, have today said, given the high number of rates it's a sensible but cautious place to be?
I think the issue of wearing masks is going to be an issue of live debate moving forward. But I think what we are saying here in Scotland is that the First Minister has to now drop the mandatory blanket requirements for us to wear masks in certain public spaces and instead trust the Scottish people to do the right thing. That's what we've done in the past, for example, at Christmas when the restrictions were lifted and we relied on guidance. But now for the third time, she is effectively saying that the government knows better than the public. It's time to let the public make their own decision, to make their own risk calculation. I'm sure many will still wear masks in certain settings, but she should now effectively be lifting all the remaining restrictions, and that's what business wants to see. And I think that's what very many Scots want to see as well.
You say that, but where is public opinion in Scotland? There is a sense that actually, at least up until now, she's held Scottish public support quite strongly in her response.
I don't think she has, and this is not a kind of a contest in a sense. She said she was going to be governed by the science. Various scientists, including the Chief Medical Officer in Scotland and various others, have now said that we need to move away from these blanket restrictions and get back to some degree of normality. Now, for sure, some people will continue to wear masks, for example, on crowded public transport or if visiting elderly or vulnerable relatives. That's the sensible thing to do. The question here in Scotland is, does the government need to do this by edict? Does it need to compel us to do it? Or does it say to the Scottish people that now 2 and a bit years into the pandemic, we trust you to make your own calculations and to make your own assessment and to do the right thing? And just to repeat, this is the third time she said she was going to finally remove masks, and she hasn't done so.
OK, Craig Hoy, thank you very much indeed for your time joining us there from Scotland. OK, that is it from me for today. I'm back on Monday. Up next, it's Colin Brazier. That's after the weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. There's a small chance of seeing the aurora tonight across parts of northern Britain. A greater chance, though, of seeing a frost. It's going to be a cold one right across the land. High pressure is dominating, but the winds are coming round that high down from the north. That's why it was so chilly out there today. Still a brisk wind blowing across eastern parts in particular, and still plenty of showers coming in from the east as well. So it could well turn icy overnight where we have these showers, which will be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and some snow in places for eastern Scotland, northeast England and at times for East Anglia